I'm Tom LaCrone. I'm part of Highland's Earth Care team. I'm here today to introduce Doug Neidig as someone that I've known for many years, probably when I had dark hair. And maybe he had a little more hair.
There we go. That's probably true.
It's been a long time. Doug is the CEO of Greenworks Development, a commercial solar developer that installs solar systems for schools, hospitals, municipalities, and businesses. I do think it's important to mention that this is an educational event. It's not a selling event.
Thank you.
Okay? Doug is also the president of LCCM Solar, a developer of next-generation nanotechnology-based photovoltaic cells. He holds 25 U.S. and numerous foreign patents in the electronic connector field, and Doug holds a BS in mechanical engineering from Penn State University. Doug has been involved in the solar industry since 2005 and understands what solar can do for schools, hospitals, and other users. He also understands the role that solar has to play in the avoidance of most major effects of climate change on the planet. And we're both very committed to try to make a difference because we need to do something about climate change now. And with that, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate the introduction, Will and Tom, and it's great to be here. And as has already been mentioned, this is absolutely not a sales meeting by any stretch. I'm not here to tell you that you need to put solar on the church. I'm not here to tell you that you need to put solar on your business. I'm here to talk about solar and to do an educational conversation. So Jonathan, if we can put the first slide up. I've called this intentionally a solar conversation for that reason. This is nothing but a conversation. I'd love to have you ask me questions at any time during the conversation because that's what a conversation is all about. So here we go. Normally when I talk about solar, Tom mentioned that I'm a commercial solar developer. So I'm in front of school boards all the time. I'm in front of boards of directors all the time. I'm in front of municipalities all the time, township supervisors talking about solar and talking about why those different groups should move forward with a solar project. I always talk about money, money, and money. This is all a financial play when I'm talking to the general public about these sorts of things, because when you talk about solar as an environmental issue or as a climate change issue or as something that would benefit the poorest 2 billion going on 4 billion people on the planet, which is what we're really talking about here, I can step on a landmine if I'm talking to a school board or to a board of directors. If I've got one person in the room who doesn't want to hear that, who looks at the world as everything's fine, why would we want to change things, I can blow up the whole conversation. In this case, the gloves are off as far as that's concerned. I get to talk about the fact that this really is a subject that affects the poorest couple of billion people on the planet. Those are the people who are the most closely in the crosshairs of climate change, and they're being affected already. That is absolutely part of this conversation. What fascinates me, though, is that it's what we can all do as individuals, as part of churches, as part of businesses, as part of not-for-profits, as part of all sorts of different segments of society. We can affect that in a very real sense from where we sit here. Or if we get up and go do something about it. This is what you normally hear in a church, right? That if you get up from here and go do something about it, you can affect the world. When it comes to this conversation, you really can affect the world by doing solar on your house, by doing solar on the church, by doing, and again, this is not a sales presentation, but doing solar on your business, solar at your school. In my ideal world, and I've got a very ideal world in my head, every pre-K to K to 12 to college to university student should be learning in a renewably powered environment because we become our environments. So when I'm doing solar work for schools, and I'm doing a lot of solar work for schools at this point, I'm working with groups like the National Energy Education Development Foundation down in Manassas, Virginia. They carry curriculum, energy curriculum from dirty energy to clean energy. They're not pushing renewables. They're here they've been here since 1980. They've been around since 1980 to teach kids about energy, from dirty energy to clean energy, and what the differences are and how those things affect the planet, and what the conveniences are of dirtier energy, and all those different differences. That's an education that kids are going to need increasingly as they get older. We never really, at our age, most of our ages, had to live in an energy conscious world. Energy was, for the most part, almost free. You turn the light, turn the switch on and the lights go on, and you turn your thermostat up if you're cold and you get warmer. We never really had to think about the consequences. We should have been, but we really never had to think about the consequences. At this point in the game, these kids are going to be living in a very, very energy conscious world by the time they're our age. Nadine and I, it's my wife Nadine and I have a grandson, Eli, who's 12. By the time Eli's my age, I'm 64. He may be trying to live on a planet that's unlivable by then, and that drives me crazy. So that is why I've been involved in solar since 2005. There's a spirituality about this to me. You really are protecting the most vulnerable people on the planet when you move in these sorts of directions. So let me talk to you about some of the projects that we do. I'm Greenworks Development, and I partner with a company called Solar Renewable Energy. We're in the Harrisburg, Mechanicsburg area, not too far from here. We are the largest commercial solar developer in Pennsylvania. We've put up since 2010 just shy of $250 million worth of solar assets. That's a lot of solar that's sitting out there. We've done hundreds of projects in putting that $250 million worth of solar up. Never had a project go bad on me. We set them up very conscientiously. We set them up as intelligently as we can. We have different structures because we're a CPA-driven firm, different structures for not-for-profits, for schools, hospitals, churches, than we do for for-profit businesses. This is going to be a little bit of a fire hose of information, but I'm going to talk you through how you do solar for a for-profit business, talk you through how you do solar for a not-for-profit business like a school or a hospital or a church, talk you through how you do solar for a home. All those things are things that make sense. All those things are things that you can move forward on now. All those things are things that we should be moving forward on now. So we, as Greenworks Solar Renewable Energy, are doing projects. Well, let's go with the most easily recognizable first. We just finished a couple of months ago about 16% of Trogues Brewing energy generation. It's on their roof. That's all we could fit on the roof. When you're brewing beer, you're using a lot of energy. So we put solar all over the roof. We power 16% of their brewery. They now manufacture solar-powered beer. That's a good thing. That is, marketing-wise, Chris Trogner is a real environmentalist. Marketing-wise for Chris, that's something he wanted to do because it was the right thing to do, but it's something that he wanted to do because he saw the marketing opportunity to be able to advertise the fact that he was brewing solar-powered beer. If you're an 18 to 25-year-old male or 18 to 25-year-old, that's a target market for Trogues Brewery. You want to know about the fact that there's solar-powered beer in the world, and you want to get your hands on some of that stuff. So that made sense for them. We've also done projects like, well, let's talk about, this is Susquehanna Township. So this is a municipal project. Susquehanna Township is up in the Harrisburg area. Dave Kratzer was their township supervisor a couple of years ago. Dave was very interested in moving forward with solar for all of the township administration. The township is not a for-profit business. Trogues Brewery is a for-profit business. I'll talk you through that structure. The township's a not-for-profit, obviously. There are different ways to do solar for those different types of users. This is the Midwest School District in Middleburg, PA, about an hour, or a little over an hour north and a little bit west of Harrisburg on the way up to State College. About a 2,000 student school district. They recognized the need for solar a couple of years ago. They had looked at solar from a couple of other developers, and there's people all over the world doing solar. And honestly, there are some conscientious solar developers and some that maybe aren't as conscientious. Solar's new enough that there's some wheeler dealers out there, and that's part of what I have to fight my way through or conscientiously manage my way through when I'm talking to any group, whether it's a school district or any other potential customer. Midwest powered 100% of their energy use for the district. They are looking at well, they're already educating their students. Their science classes are already using the data that are generated from their array to teach kids about energy in their science classes. They're doing the right thing, and they're saving some serious money on their solar project, and they're sheltering themselves from conventional energy increases. I'll talk to you about those things in a couple of minutes. The project that's at the top of the screen is a project that we just finished about a year and a half ago in New Jersey. You couldn't do that project in Pennsylvania because we don't have the incentives here. In New Jersey, you can. This is in Sayreville, New Jersey. This is a 17-acre man-made lake that's been around for a long time that the Sayreville Water Authority cut years ago in order to bring water off the river. They bring it into that man-made lake. They let the water sit in the lake, let the sediments settle out of the water. They pull water off the top of the lake then, and they process that to distribute to the area. That's the Water Authority's way to do this. They recognized about 4 years ago that they had an opportunity to put solar on that lake to generate electricity on that lake, as well as to supply water to their customer base. They bid this thing all over the place. It attracted a lot of attention. We won that bid, and we wound up building an 11-acre, 4.4 megawatt floating solar array in New Jersey. Can't do that in Pennsylvania because we don't have the incentives, and energy cost here, electricity cost here is not as high as it is in New Jersey, and I'll talk you through all the different building blocks that you need in order to be able to build a project like that. You should be able to build that in Pennsylvania. You should be able to build that anywhere in the country, because if it makes sense in New Jersey, why wouldn't it make sense everywhere else? I'll talk you through the politics of that. That's how that works. This was the largest floating solar array in the country until someone built one in California about 6 months ago, which kind of ticked me off a little bit. We are now working on one that's twice this size that I think, from everything that I'm seeing, is going to wind up being the largest floating array in the world, which is a good thing. If you've got questions anytime during this is a conversation, so conversations are normally two-way streets instead of me just standing here with a discourse. So if you've got questions, let me know. So here's another project that I'm working on right now. I'm still on the front end of this. I'm hoping it's going to work out really well, but I wanted to talk to you about this project to put this whole subject in context. I'm talking to the energy director for St. Vincent and the Grenadines down in the Caribbean. Here's the Dominican Republic and Haiti down into the Lesser Antilles. Here's St. Vincent and the Grenadines right here. So blow it up. This is a blow up of that area in the Caribbean. It's just off the coast of Venezuela. St. Vincent has about 110,000 people on the island chain really. They are right now shipping diesel fuel out to the island every day to burn the diesel fuel to generate 80% of the electricity on the island. They're shipping that diesel fuel out there, they're burning it. They are not burning it as cleanly as they should be by any stretch, and it's diesel fuel, so it's the dirtier stuff. Their electricity cost in shipping and burning this stuff is about 35 cents a kilowatt hour. They are trying to build more of a tourist-oriented economy that used to be a banana economy, actually. 80% of their GDP was in bananas. They are really down in the banana business. They're trying to retool the economy in tourism. Burning all of that diesel fuel is polluting the island chain. It's undermining their economy. They are also noticing over the last 5 to 10 years that they're watching their coastlines go away. So they've got an expensive thing that they're doing. They are undermining their economy because they're polluting themselves to death, and they're watching their coastline go away. Their goal, and what I'm working on with them right now, is to figure out how to retool all that 80% of their electricity that they're using with diesel fuel right now to use solar. They need about a 20 megawatt solar project. What I showed you for the school district a couple minutes ago was about a 2.5 megawatt project, so they need a little under 10 times. It's not a big island chain. They need a little under 10 times what I did for the school about a year or two ago. We're gonna, I think, be able to do that. I've got to work out some issues here, but I think we're going to be able to do that. This island chain is a microcosm of the planet. They're burning diesel fuel, it's expensive, they're polluting their environment, they're undermining their economy, and they're watching their coastline go away. Their response to that is that they want to retool that 80% of their electricity with solar in the next 3 to 4 years. To me, that's a rational response. What's irrational to me is the rest of the planet's response to this, that yeah, there's probably a problem there, but if I just do this, I'll be okay. I won't look over there. It fascinates me, the opportunity to do this kind of a project with an island nation like this and get some international press out there that says that we are, as a planet, we're in no different situation. It's just a bigger boat, but we're in no different situation than the guys in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are. They recognize the problem and they're going to do something about it. So here we go. So the question to the group then is, why aren't we moving forward quickly with solar? Give me two, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but give me 1 or 2 or 3 of the main reasons why we're not moving quickly on solar.
Because we're afraid the Chinese are going to be solar panels and we're giving them.
That's fair? That's fair? Okay. And there's political reasons why we could fix that. Well, you ought to see it from in here. It's incredible. The political power of the fossil fuel industry is unbelievable. Other reasons? Cost. The other one that I hear all the time is, well, wait a minute, if I just wait another 10 years, the cost of solar will be low enough that it'll really make sense. Right now, it doesn't make sense. So it's power of the fossil fuel industry, it's politics in general, and it's supposed cost. Let's take that and walk into the rest of this. This fascinates me that every hour, by the time we're done with this conversation today, the planet will have seen enough energy from the sun to power the entire planet for a year. That's nuts. So all we need to do is find the political will to do that. We already have the technology. The technology is not the problem. It really isn't all that expensive. I'll show that to you in a minute. It's all about political will, and it's about the stranglehold of the fossil fuel industry that we're not using that fact. When I talk to the folks on St. Vincent, they say that what they want to do is use their natural resource, which is sunshine. If there's anything they have in the Caribbean, it's sunshine. They want to use it. But the planet's got the sunshine that it needs. A lot of detail here, but this is Pennsylvania's situation. When you look at Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is a gas state. That's what I hear all the time when I'm talking to legislators. I'll be talking to another legislator on Tuesday, and I will hear that Pennsylvania is a gas state. And gas is clean energy, right? That's what they'll tell me. Well, no, it's not at all, but that's what they'll tell me. Gas is clean energy, and Pennsylvania is a gas state, so we're good. We don't need to really go anywhere with this at all. And what I'm hearing is a lobbyist's hand behind that legislator moving the mouth when he or she says that. And that drives me crazy. This is a pie chart that shows Pennsylvania's electric production, how we produce our electricity in Pennsylvania. About 55% of it is produced by gas right now. That's the yellow slice of the pie. There's gas right there. About 15 or 20% is still produced by coal, which is incredible to me, but 15 or 20% of Pennsylvania's electricity is still produced by coal. Now, guess what's going to happen without any other effect happening as that coal starts to go away for obvious reasons? This yellow area is going to expand, right? Another 30% or so is nuclear. Nuclear's in distress as well. 3 Mile Island doesn't operate any longer. Guess what's going to happen to that nuclear piece of the pie as nuclear continues to decline? These guys are going to take over that bit as well. And right now, the gas industry really does have Pennsylvania's legislature convinced that we are in good shape. That if all of our electricity is generated by gas, except for that little blue slice right there that's hydro, and that little, what should be green slice right there that's solar and wind, almost can't see them, that as long as we're a clean gas state, we're good. This is, and I'm taking too much time here, but this is where Pennsylvania ranks in terms of its carbon dioxide emissions, and this is on an absolute basis. So, we're a relatively smaller state, but we're right up there with Florida, with California, and with Texas in terms of our emissions. We are way down the list when it comes to solar capacity installed by state on the East Coast. We are down there with Connecticut, and this is on an absolute basis as well. We're down there with Connecticut, Vermont, and Rhode Island on an absolute basis because we don't have the politics and the policy in place to be able to move forward on more solar projects. New Jersey is almost off the chart here when it comes, well, you can't see, there's New Jersey. New Jersey, Florida, and North Carolina are way ahead of us. New Jersey's actually a lot further than that. This is a slide that I grabbed that's about a year or two old now. This is the solar policy that we've put together. New York's policy is 70% renewables by 2030. Jersey's 50% by 2030. Delaware's 25% by 2025. DC's 100% by 2032. Virginia's 30% by 2030, 100% by 2050. Pennsylvania's stated goal still is 8% by 2021. We couldn't be any further out of the race in terms of our current policy for renewables. How's solar work? Very briefly, it's pretty straight up. This is a solar panel. There are no moving parts to a solar panel. The same semiconductor material that's in these things that makes these things the magic that they are, that you carry around in your pocket, that same semiconductor material sits in the middle of the solar panel that takes photons from sunlight, energizes the atoms in the semiconductor material, throws a free electron that creates a positive charge as well. You collect all of the negatives to one electrode, all the positives to another electrode. That creates a work loop, and you generate electricity. There are no moving parts, which means that every panel that I install has a 30-year power production warranty to it. If you don't get 80% of the rated power output of that panel in 30 years, the manufacturer will replace that panel free of cost to you. You don't put a 30-year warranty on anything unless you know it's going to last a lot longer than 30 years, and these things do. So that's a very reliable system that sits on the roof. Yes? The efficiency of the panel, question Tom asked is, has the efficiency of the panels improved in the last few years? Marginally. So by efficiency, we're talking the amount of sunlight, the amount of energy that hits the panel as a ratio to the amount of electricity that you produce. We're currently in the 19–20% conversion efficiency range, and that's going up really marginally because there's some physics in the way here. Nature's really protecting that boundary pretty hard. The theoretical limit is 33%, 33.6. We're in the 20s, and it's hard to push it much beyond that. The power densities have increased significantly, though. So efficiency is per unit area, how much energy hits versus how much energy is able to be generated. Power density is for a solar panel that's a 3x6 solar panel, how many watts can I get off of that guy? And that's a packaging problem, like in the connector business years ago that Chuck and I were in. You wanted to pack more and more into a smaller space. That's what the engineers, not the physicists are still hitting the wall in terms of efficiency. The engineers are always beating the physicists. Engineers have been able to package more cell density into a panel. So when I showed you some of those slides earlier that were a couple of years old, those might have been 300-watt panels. I've actually installed in Harrisburg on one of my commercial buildings 175-watt panels. I'm putting 540s up now. That's a big difference. So the density has gone up significantly, not the efficiency.
How about, that's one technology I've heard about, panels that were not as efficient, but considerably cheaper to put up, and you have to weigh those.
Yep, you do have to weigh those two things. There are other technologies available, thin film technologies that are available that aren't as efficient, but they're significantly cheaper. What you deal with when you deal with this stuff is the cost per watt ratio. And the cost per watt ratio on a thin film, cheaper panel per watt doesn't make sense. That's why the whole world has moved in the direction of conventional rigid panels. Now, when I was introduced, Tom mentioned that I'm involved in a nanotechnology solar development as well with a professor up at Penn State University Park who wrote the textbook. There are opportunities to be able to make thin film, very inexpensive cells very efficient. And if you can combine a more efficient than conventional technology, very low cost, maybe under 10 cents a watt, ready to be installed cost, then the world changes without all the legislative stuff. And boy, if somebody can figure this out right now, and there's people all over the world working on that, the world would change in a hurry. And that's a whole other subject that we can talk about if you want me to come back down at some point. So you take all of those panels that are solid state, that are really reliable, you put them all on a roof, or you put them all on the ground in Pennsylvania, or if you're in New Jersey, you put them all on the water, or you put them in canopies over parking lots, which you can't do in Pennsylvania because we don't have the incentives, but I can do that in New Jersey or California all day long. When I was in electronics years ago, and I spent half my time out in the Silicon Valley back in the 90s, there were solar canopies showing up in Silicon Valley all over the place because California already had the right policy in place to be able to incentivize that stuff. You can do that in New Jersey. That's why New Jersey is so far ahead of us. You can do that in Massachusetts, not so much in Pennsylvania. It's all about policy. It's all about policy, and it's all about the fact that we've subsidized and tax loopholed the fossil fuel industry so much that I have to, as a solar developer, compete with 5 cents, 6 cents a watt, per kilowatt hour conventional fossil fuel generated electricity. It's hard for me to do that. I'm not playing a fair fight. I've got almost both hands tied behind my back while I'm trying to fight the fossil fuel industry doing this kind of stuff cost competitively. So you put all those panels on a roof. Those things just sit on the roof. They don't penetrate the roof. You don't screw them down. The industry's evolved out of that. You now just ballast them on there so that you can see the little concrete blocks that sit on each panel. They just weight the system down onto the roof, and you tie all those panels together so they won't blow off the roof. So we work with the manufacturer of the roofing product to make sure that that warranty survives the installation of the solar, and the solar panels actually protect the roof. It makes the roof last longer. So it actually enhances the reliability of the roof by putting the solar up there. You tie them all together, you run that power down the side of the building, in this case, into what's called an inverter. That inverter turns the DC electricity that these panels generate into AC electricity that you use out of the wall. That's the only part of the system that's going to go south on you over the 40 to 50 year expected life of any solar project. That inverter's a mechanical device. It'll be installed with a 20-year warranty. In all of my cash flow analyses that I do for new solar projects, I build in a full inverter replacement cost in year 21. Things always go bad on you the year after the warranty expires, right? That's how it works. You then run that power after you've turned it into AC through a bidirectional meter, and that meter runs either forward or backward. At night, if you aren't generating solar, but you're still using electricity in the building, you're running that meter in a conventional way. If you're a school district and it's the middle of July, and you're producing like crazy because it's the middle of July, but school's not in session and you're not using a lot, you're pushing that excess electricity back to the grid. And Pennsylvania is what's called a net metering state, which means you're buying and selling electricity across that bidirectional meter at the same retail cost. And that effectively turns the grid into your battery. That's huge. So there are legislators funded by the fossil fuel industry that'll constantly try to take net metering out in a state like Pennsylvania. If you took net metering out and I could only supply to the grid at wholesale instead of retail, maybe at 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour versus 7, 8 cents a kilowatt hour, I can't do solar. And they know that. That's a whole other conversation. So we could do the conversation about technology at some point. We can do the conversation about policy at some point. I could be here for hours talking about those kinds of things. Chuck, what's that?
You have to do when a roof like this, you often have to replace the roof because what's currently on there is not sufficient.
Right. So, well, it is. So we do things a couple of different ways. If a roof is 10 years old or newer, I'll put the solar up there. If a roof is 30 years old, 20 years old or older, I'll start to talk to the owner of the building about what they want to do with the roof. If they're planning on replacing the roof anyway, now's the time to do it before I put the solar up there. And I can actually, if they replace the roof with a white membraned roof instead of a black membrane roof, I'm using bifacial panels, which means those panels are collecting from the top and from the underside of the panel, which is kind of interesting. You get about 3, 4, 5% more efficiency out of the panel by collecting from the underside too. If you put a white roof under those panels, that white roof is reflective. It's a high albedo, it's reflective. It's gonna be able to let the panels generate more, so I can pull some of the cost of that roof replacement in underneath the 26% federal tax credit for the project, and make sense for that company out of replacing the roof, help them capture some of those costs. If you've got a roof that's 15 years old, let's say for a school district, and I'm doing a 40-year cash flow analysis for that project, and I know that in another 10, 15 years they're gonna need to replace the roof, in that 10 or 15-year period in a 40-year cash flow, I'll put in the cost to move the system, not to replace the whole roof, but to move half the system at a time, take half of it apart. These things are like Tinker Toys sitting on the roof. They're not that bolted together. They're just snapped together on the roof. I'll put in the cost to take half the system apart, move it over to the other side of the roof, replace that side of the roof, put that back together and do the reverse. And for a $9 or $10 million cash savings and cash flow to a school district over 40 years, in the case of the one that I showed you on the first slide, the moving the array cost might be $200,000. $300,000. If you're going to save 9 or 10 million over 40 years, and 15 or 20 years in, you're going to spend $200,000 or $300,000 to move it. Pretty easy decision. Sure. Great questions. Keep asking them if you would. Why solar now? Why would I want to do this now? One of the things that came up was cost. That you don't want to do this at this point because the cost of solar is too high. In fact, solar for about 70% of the planet is already the cheapest way to make electricity. It's just way up in the extreme latitudes that it's not the cheapest way to make electricity. It is the cheapest way to make electricity in most of the developed world already. The problem is that it needs to compete with a heavily subsidized fossil fuel industry that not only gets direct tax and subsidies from governments, from state and local and federal governments, but also doesn't have to pay for its cost to the planet and to society. And if you put all those costs on top of the cost of fossil fuel generated electricity, the whole world would be at 35 to 45 cents a kilowatt hour electricity, and I wouldn't need any subsidies at all to be able to put this stuff up. But that's the game that we're in right now. We are actively in the energy wars. So right now, when I got out of high school, the year I got out of high school was 1975, and this chart happens to start at 1975. Solar was, the panels themselves were $101 a watt. I'm now buying panels for 40 cents a watt. The cost of panels has come down to the point where they're unbelievably low cost, and if anyone who's ever worked with a cost curve has seen a curve like this, once you get out here, there's not a lot of other cost opportunity going on. So we're to a point now with solar technology where it's only that revolutionary nanotechnology development that we were talking about 5 minutes ago that's going to really drop costs significantly more. So the cost of solar, you can't make that argument. I'll get that argument when I'm talking to a school district. I've seen it 3 times now. The business manager will call me in the middle of this whole multi-month conversation when the board's looking at it and everything's moving in the direction that we're going to go solar. Wait a minute, I just talked to our electricity broker who says that if you wait another 5 or 10 years, it's going to be a lot cheaper, and that's what you ought to do. And I have to go back to this conversation in those situations to say, I understand your electricity broker wants you to stay with fossil fuel generated electricity for another 5 or 10 years, but here's the reality of what is going on. That's not real, what they're telling you. Not that they're not good people, but they want to hang on to their business. So cost of solar's, cost of solar's come down tremendously up here. We're in PPL territory here. PPL from November of 2020 to November of 2021, a 12-month period, their electricity cost, commercial electricity cost, went up 69%. That's huge, 69%. The war in Ukraine, which is a bad thing for lots and lots and lots of different reasons, is not a good thing for fuel cost. And it's going to go up again, and that's going to be a global phenomenon. There are already mechanisms that I'm seeing. I can see what's going on in the future markets on this stuff. I'm seeing 10 to 15% more cost increase in the conventional electricity market right now. That's before Putin went into Ukraine. And that is going to dramatically affect global cost. We can do better than that. We shouldn't have to be worried about those kinds of things in 2020. We shouldn't have to be worried about somebody invading some other country. We shouldn't have to worry about what effect that's going to have on fossil fuel costs at this point. If we tried, we could do what St. Vincent wants to do and redesign ourselves out of that so that we wouldn't have to worry about it. Up at the top, right now, there's a 26% federal tax credit for solar. If you put up a $1 million solar array on your business, you'll get $260,000 year one as a federal tax credit. That's a direct deduction. So if you were going to pay as a commercial business, if you're Trogues Brewery and your tax liability that first year was $500,000, $260,000 of that you get to hang on to. That's huge. So a 26% federal tax credit is one of the first things that you look at when you're doing a solar project. That 26% federal tax credit, unless it gets extended between now and the end of the year, which it might, that's happened in the past, unless it gets extended, that's going to step down to 22% next year in 2023, and it's, unless it gets extended, going to step down to 10% in 2024. I honestly think it'll get extended as part of the Build Back Better plan, and there's a lot of conversation going on around that now. If you looked back a couple of years before 2021, back in here, this was actually at 30%, and my guess is that we're going to reinstate back to 30% credit for solar, but you just don't know. And if there's one thing I know in dealing with renewables over the last 10 years, it's that when you've got all the right things in place and all the right incentives that are available to you for a project, you grab it. You do not take what's behind door number 2 if you're on Let's Make a Deal. You take what's in your hand and you go.
Is that 26% of installation?
26% of the full cost of installation, that's correct. That's big. So if you've got a $6 million project on your hand, it's 26% of that full $6 million to put it up. That's big. You know, if you're going to put solar on your house and it's a $20,000 project to put the solar on your house, 26% of that $20,000, a little over $5,000, you would get as a first-year tax credit if you had the federal tax liability. If you're retired, maybe doesn't mean as much to you. If you still have income and you're still going to see federal taxes, you're going to see a 26% tax credit on that. Another question. 26% across, with 26% across the board for any solar that goes up, residential, for-profit, not-for-profit. In 2024, unless it gets extended, that's going to drop down to 10% for commercial and 0% for residential. So especially if you're a homeowner and you've been thinking about this for a while, unless you have more faith in the federal government and politics than I do, you want to go now. I'll talk to you about that in a second, exactly. I'll talk to you exactly about that in a second and how we structure those deals. 80% of the work that we do as a solar developer is for not-for-profit businesses because my partners are all CPAs and I'm an engineer and I'm working on the nanotech bit, so when I've been doing solar conversations about the technology all over the mid-Atlantic over the last 10 years or so, one of the things I say is that solar really isn't a technology business in terms of the conventional technology. That's been around since 1954, is when the first solar panel was sold. It's been around longer than I have, and I've been around a while now. Solar is not a technology business, it's a tax, accounting, and finance business. If you have folks involved who know the ins and outs and know structure on these sorts of projects, for a not-for-profit, you can make as much sense out of solar as you can for a for-profit business. Another question?
What does it do to the cost of the house if you sell?
That's a controversial subject. So when we put solar on the roof of our place that I'll show you in a couple of minutes a couple of years ago, I got some real pushback from the Homeowners Association because some of the people on the board of the Homeowners Association were convinced that the value in the neighborhood was going to plummet. The National Association of Realtors will tell you that for every kilowatt of solar that you put on your roof, you'll increase the value of your house $4,000. And that's a national study that they did. So we put 11 kilowatts of solar on our roof. According to them, that's a $44,000 increase in the value of our home. There's some controversy there, and it's a little bit, it's debatable. I think that, you know, given that when we're in transition months, May, June, our electric bill's $16 a month, $20 a month for a 3,200 square foot house, that's attractive to a buyer, especially a younger buyer who understands that they're doing the right thing for the planet while they're going to pay a $16 electric bill when everybody else's bill's going up 70% in a year. So I think the value of solar to a home is significant, as long as you put it up right. You know, don't pay attention to the guy who knocks on your door and says, I'll put it up for you for no cost at all. I'll talk more about this in a couple of minutes. All you have to do is sign here and I'll supply you electricity from the system that from my system that I'm going to put on your house. I'll supply you electricity for the next 25 years. That's not the way to do it. I'll talk to you about that in a couple of minutes. So moving forward, there's also PA SRECs. These are green certificates. When you produce a megawatt hour of solar, 1,000 kilowatt hours of solar, you get a green certificate that's saleable on a controlled market in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania requires of its generators that they produce a certain amount of their electricity generation via solar. Right now it's 0.5%. Not a lot at all. We're working on that. I'll be back in the Capitol on Tuesday talking to leadership about trying to get that 0.5% bumped up to 2.5%, which would do great things for SREC values. Right now, those SREC values in Pennsylvania are about $40 per credit. That's about the equivalent of 4 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity. If I can get a 0.5% moved up to 2.5%, I'll get that value up to 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is 8 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour, $80 to $100 per certificate. That starts to look more like New Jersey. Not completely New Jersey, but more like New Jersey. Now that with energy cost increases, conventional energy costs, now I can start to look at putting solar on parking lots. That'd be a big deal. There are utility rebates out there right now. The PPL rebate for solar that was announced about 1.5 years ago now is 28 cents a watt. I'm doing a 3.8 megawatt, 10-acre project that we're just starting now for the Central Columbia School District up near Bloomsburg. About a $6.5 million project. I'm getting $1 million rebate from PPL for that project. That's huge. That rebate, if you're going to put solar on your roof, about the same amount of solar that we put on our roof 2 years ago, we'd have gotten a check for about $4,000 for that system. I think it's too generous. My experience with these things from utilities is when they put those sorts of plans on the street that are too generous, they tend to pull them quickly because they realize what they did. It's available right now. Now's the time to grab it. It's the let's make a deal issue again, right? When it's there, you take it. And then reason 5 is that there are also what are called USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, grants for solar. Those things, if you're in a more rural situation, and Harrisburg, believe it or not, is rural. I've got to check Lancaster to see if Lancaster is looked at as rural by the USDA. You could get 25% of your project paid for through a USDA REAP grant, Renewable Energy Assistance Program, that could be worth up to $250,000 for your project. So for that school district up in Central Columbia, up in Bloomsburg, they're going to get $1 million from reason 4. They're going to get maybe about $250,000 from reason 5 for a $6 million project. $1.25 million that falls out of the sky on you is not a bad place to start. So here's a for-profit business, and I know I'm chewing way into our hour already, and there's a lot of other things I want to talk to you about. Here's a for-profit business. This is a local auto dealership that we are working with right now. They're going to put solar on their roof. It's a 1/4 megawatt, 240 kW DC. They are going to spend $400,000 on that system. Basically, when you take the 26% federal tax credit off of that $400,000, you take bonus depreciation, which we didn't talk about, but it's available for these sorts of things for a nonprofit business. That's another $115,000 year 1. You take that solar rebate from PPL is another $50,000 off there. That $401,000 turns into $133,000 net cost for that. That doesn't even include the USDA REAP grant that could be worth another $100,000. That $400,000 project, if you take that 100 off of that 133, could be a $33,000 net cost to the business. Why wouldn't you do that? This is for an auto dealership that's got customers already beating their doors down for electric vehicles. And this is one of the largest auto dealerships in the country, and the guy who runs this chain of dealerships is saying to his people while I'm sitting with him, I want solar on all of our roofs, I want drone videos of all of that solar showing on every one of our showrooms in all of our dealerships, because when these people come in to buy electric vehicles, I want to let them know that we're the good guys. And he's right. That's the way you should be playing it at this point. So in this situation, forget all this calculus for a second. If they put up a $400,000 system and they put 25% of the cost of that system in up front, so if the dealership put $100,000 in and they borrow the 75% of the balance of it, they borrow the $300,000, I'm going to get them with all of this stuff, without including this, but all this stuff, they'll get 250+% of their money back year one on that $100,000 25% investment. Show me where else I can put $100,000 and in 12 months I'll get $250,000 and I'll put $100,000 into that too, right? So the dealership's looking at this, they got marketing reasons to do it, but in the meanwhile they're going to get 250% of their money back year one and then about a 6-7% return for the next 20 years based on the payments they have to make and the investment. That's a good deal. Great question. And that was actually one of the couple of questions that I got via email from some of you before today. And the answer to that is that it depends how many chargers they have sitting there, and it depends what kind of chargers. So a level 3 charger is a fast charger. I've got my electric vehicle out in the parking lot right now. It's a Nissan Leaf. If I'm traveling, I've got to stop at a level 3 charger, which is a 440 volt charger, because I can charge 80% of my range in about 40 minutes, which is about 20 minutes too long to sit there, but it is what it is, right? So if it's a level 3 charger, those things are using power like crazy. And if you had a bank of level 3 chargers all lined up and cars plugged into every one of them, the solar likely wouldn't be able to supply on an instantaneous basis what I was drawing, because I'm pulling 440 10 times over, let's say, and I can't supply that, and nor do I want to supply that much energy instantaneously, because when I don't have 10 cars lined up charging, then I got all this generation that I'm not using. All of these programs, all these systems are installed on a 12-month-a-year basis. So the first thing I'll ask anyone, a school or a hospital or a church or a homeowner, is get me one recent electricity bill for every meter in your system. I take a look at that bill and it tells me how much electricity you're using as a church or as a business over the course of a year. And I design your system for a 12-month offset, knowing that, you remember from earlier, the grid's your battery. So if you're a school district and in July, school's not in, I'm not using much electricity, but it's July, so I'm generating a lot, I'm pushing that off to the grid. But over the course of a year, I want to balance them out so that they're producing as much as they're using, and that's what we do. So when I say a school district is 100% offset, that doesn't mean instantaneous. It means over the course of a year, I'm building a system that will generate what they use over the course of a year. Now, when I'm talking to dealerships and they're going to put, or anyone really, that's going to put charging stations in the front of the building, now the calculus is, well, how many charging stations are you going to put up? Are you going to put up level 3s or level 2s, which are 220s, which will give you 30 to 40 miles of range per hour? If you're going to pull up to work and you're going to be there for 8 hours and you're going to get 30 miles per hour of charge, of range, you plug in, that makes sense. If I'm traveling to Pittsburgh, I don't want to hear about 20 miles or 30 miles of range per hour. I'm going to be sitting there for a whole day waiting to get the rest of the way to Pittsburgh, which I actually had to do a couple of years ago when I tried it the first time. So in that case for a dealership, and this is all kind of new now that people are looking to put charging stations at their schools, at their businesses, at their dealership, I want to know, we got to play the numbers. I want to know how many chargers they're going to put in, what type of chargers they're going to put in, what their expected use seems to be on that, because I'll build their system incrementally larger. Now I'm going to look at their electric bill and say, well, this is what your lights and your HVAC and all that stuff are doing, but now you're going to be using this other amount, budgeted amount, for these chargers. So let's incrementally build your system to be able to handle that load over the course of a year. Not instantaneous, but over the course of a year. And that's kind of fun that we're in this. It's a great time to be an engineer right now, because we really are repowering the country and the world, hopefully in time, right? That's the game we're in.
You had mentioned this now, but you've been saying the grid is your battery.
The grid is your battery.
If that doesn't happen, all of the assumptions you're making need to be refigured.
They do. But here's the other play. So that's a great question. So if the grid isn't my battery, if the hardcore fossil fuel bought and paid for legislator takes net metering out and I don't have the grid as my battery any longer, then what do I do? The answer is that 2022, if you're paying attention, 2022, if you watch the Super Bowl, about half the commercials during the Super Bowl were for electric vehicles. That's pretty cool. The new electric that I just ordered, that's going to be in a couple of months, was one of those commercials, the Nissan Ariya. That's going to make battery cost plummet. The cost of solar I showed you a while ago has already gotten down to the point where it can't go any lower. Battery costs are right about there right now, where they've come down a lot when you look at the curves over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, and there's opportunity yet. And 2022 is the year of the electric vehicle, where everybody's going to buy electric cars. That's going to take battery costs down like crazy. And so when I'm dealing with the legislature and dealing with politics, all I'm trying to do right now is negotiate a long enough runway with net metering still in place that I know that battery costs are going to drop, so that I can drop net metering at some point and still be okay. At some point, it won't be that expensive for a home or a school or a business to put those batteries in place. Then I don't care about that other policy. These are the energy wars.
Lithium-ion batteries are not good, but we're not going to have enough capacity to build lithium-ion batteries.
That's correct.
Other kinds of batteries.
Correct. You should be doing this presentation, not me. There are plenty of other technologies and plenty of other means of building the battery that are getting away from lithiums and getting away from those sorts of really tricky parts of the world sourced products, sourced components. All kinds of interesting battery work is going on right now. And lots of work on battery recycling too. That's the big pushback I get. One of the big pushbacks I get is, wait a minute, all these batteries, we're going to pollute the planet. Oh my God, then what do we do? And my answer is, are you paying attention to where we are now? I mean, can it get much worse? Right? So there are battery recycling programs, well-funded programs going on right now, and that's got to be the way out of this. You know, the only other way to do this is to go back to where we were a couple thousand years ago and just, light fires. And even that doesn't really do the job at this point with, 8 going on 10 billion people on the planet. Technology is the only way out of this. Another question. Say it again, please. Yep, absolutely. So the break-even thing on the bottom, if you did this project, now I'm not including this REAP grant, this $100,000 REAP grant here. If you did this project based on these numbers and based on current electricity cost, and that's the play here, is that electricity went up 70% in 12 months. If you did it on current electricity cost, your break even, if you put every dollar in, that whole $400,000 in just as a check up front, the question is how long would it take to break even? Right now, that figures to 6.1 years at current electricity cost. If you did that 25% investment, you put that $100,000 in that I talked to you about, you'd get 250+% back in year one. Your break-even point at that point is like 12 minutes, right? If you're going to get 250% of your money back year one, it really depends on when your system gets turned on, because if you turned your system on in March, well, let's say by the end of a year and you were able to file your taxes in April, a couple months later, your break-even was like whatever that period of time was between those two, right? So break-even is good, but if you finance these systems correctly, it's phenomenal. And I learned from running a business for years that you finance assets reflective of the life of the asset, right? Chuck, it almost got me in trouble at Intercon when I was doing an electronics business and building electronic connectors. I was making a bunch of money, and I just paid for all my equipment out of pocket, and I was putting $250,000, $500,000 machines in place out of pocket, left, right, and center. The economy turned down on me, and it almost cost me. And if I'd have just financed those things because they were going to last for 20 years, I'd have been okay. That's what you want to do here. I don't recommend to anyone that they do that 100% investment. Even if they've got the cash, I always tell them, you're going to get 250% of your money back if you just borrow 75% of it. Keep your cash in the bank. Yep, here we go, nonprofit, and I am pushing my time real hard right now. Not-for-profit, so this is schools, hospitals, lots of not-for-profits. I'm talking to Hamilton Health up in Harrisburg right now, lots of not-for-profits. A school, hospital, any not-for-profit doesn't have federal tax liability. You can't use that 26% federal tax credit directly, nor can you use the 87% bonus depreciation that I talked to you about a couple of minutes ago. Those are two pieces of the puzzle that you've got to be able to put into place to be successful. 80% of the work that we do is with not-for-profit businesses, lots of schools, hospitals, those sorts of entities. What we do is we create a special purpose entity. The reason I drew a box around this is we'll create a special purpose limited partnership that's comprised of investors. These are third-party investors who have federal tax liability, and they can use the bonus depreciation as well. So they set the system up. Let's talk about a school, the school that I showed you on the first slide. That school signed a 28-year agreement to essentially lease the system from the investors who were going to put it up. They didn't put any money in up front at all. School paid zero out of pocket. And this isn't like the guy who knocks on your door to put solar on your roof. This is a different structure. School put zero money into this up front. The investors bought the system, installed the system. They'll operate and maintain the system for an initial 5-year period at least, and they have to hold the system for 5 years, or they have to give that 26% federal tax credit back to the IRS, and they don't want to do that. So they put the system up, the investors do. The school or the church or the hospital or any nonprofit pays a monthly contract service payment to the investors for the use of the system, but they still will be cash flow positive day one, year one. We make sure of that when we do the analysis. They'll be cash flow positive. So the school that I showed you on the first slide, about $100,000 to the good first year when I turned the system on. You put the system up, the school pays that monthly contract service payment. In this case, the school's going to see electricity savings, and those are currently running 7-8 cents a kilowatt hour, and they're going up in a hurry, so we project that into the cash flow analysis. The school will also get all of their SREC value, all that other value from the green certificates that I talked to you about. School gets that as well. They pay a monthly contract service payment for the use of the system. They get all their electricity savings, they get all their SREC value, and that school for a in that case, $4 million system is going to make about $100,000 year one, $100,000 a year for the first 5 years. Once they buy the system, and we'll help them get the right financing to buy the system, and there's 30-year low-interest, fixed-interest vehicles, USDA and other vehicles available for that. That $100,000 for the school I showed you goes up over $200,000, about $225,000 a year, still putting no money into it out of pocket. So when I showed this to Ray Kinder, who's the superintendent of the Tamaqua School District up in the middle of coal country a couple of years ago, Ray looked at his cash flow analysis, and he's looking, in his case it was about $100,000 for the first 5 years and over $200,000 after year 6. And he looked at the spreadsheet that I'd handed him for about 2 minutes or so, which is a long time to sit quiet for me, but I did. And after 2 minutes, he looked up over the top of the spreadsheet and he says, "This means I can do full day kindergarten, doesn't it?" And I said, "Ray, that's exactly what I wanted you to say. That's exactly the right answer. Yes, you can, because you're going to have an annuity on your hands that's a 40-year annuity that's going to pay you $100,000 for the first 5 years, and then over $200,000 if conventional electricity costs don't go up." And they're going to. And the other thing that's great about this is that once you put a solar array up, whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit, you now control your own energy future. The only cost of solar, the fuel's free, right? It's coming down every day. The only cost of solar is your finance cost, and if you can find a way to put a 20 or 30-year long-term fixed interest financing vehicle in place, and I can work with you to do that. They're everywhere if you know where to look. You now know exactly what your fuel cost is going to be, your electricity cost is going to be for the next 40 years. If you're a school, if you're anybody, if you're a homeowner, that's big, because the cost... Say it again. There is no difference. It's a not-for-profit structure. I would do exactly this. If you, yes, Yes, if you wanted me to do so, and I'm not here to sell, but if you wanted me to do solar for the church or for anything else down here that were a nonprofit, a school or whatever, I would do it exactly this way. And it wouldn't cost you. Right, for those first 5 years, maintenance is included in that monthly payment, and then the maintenance for these systems isn't that big of a deal, and we'll show you exactly what it's going to be for the following 30 years. Yep, it's not that big of a deal. That's not a bad bit, right? If you're a school or you're a church or you're a hospital, that is not a bad way to go. Plus, if you're the school or the church, you get to market your environmental stewardship, especially if you're a church. You know, one of the things that fascinates me about our culture at this point is the churches are not really, I love the fact that I'm able to come down, stand in a sanctuary and talk about this, because churches are not involved in this conversation, and yet the poorest 2 billion going on 4 billion people on the planet really are right in the crosshairs of this whole global mess that we're creating. And churches are kind of ignoring that, and that, a lot of good things about churches, but that drives me a little bit crazy. When Tom asked me if I'd come down, I said, absolutely, I'll be down to talk about this in a church. Another question? How much will you? Well, so if you don't sell those certificates and you keep your greenness, you know, you can look at that as those certificates are your greenness. So when Pennsylvania announced its 191 megawatt Pennsylvania Pulse project summer a year ago, they decided that they weren't going to sell their certificates. They were going to keep their greenness, and that's great. The way I look at the world is, I don't care if you sell those certificates or keep them, you're doing the right thing for the planet. The planet doesn't care whether you've sold those certificates or not. If you've got someone willing to buy them, who has to buy them because of state mandate to meet their quota for generation of solar, you still did the right thing, right? That 2 billion people on the planet are going to benefit because of what you did, whether you sell those certificates or not, to me. There's that school district, and I already talked to you about these numbers, and we're already out of time. So there's 100% of the usage, $225,000 after the buyout. It's about $100,000 a year before the buyout. $8.9 million worth of savings over 40 years before the rate increase. That's wild. I threw this picture up there too. This is the Susquehanna University array. I didn't do that one, but I was up to visit the Susquehanna University array. All of these systems are always fenced. And you can put sheep in that fenced area that'll maintain the grass under the array. And for the sheep to live under a bifacial panel that gives you this filtered sunlight down through, they love it. This guy couldn't have posed for me any better if I'd have wanted to. This is Solar Bob, is what I call him. Here's our house. We put 11.34 kW on the roof about 2 years ago now. Our electricity bills really are 15 or 20 bucks a month in the right months. They'll go up a little higher than that now, but they're 15 or 20 bucks a month in the right month. This powers 75% of our house's electricity use and our electric car. I'm working to get that to 100. If I'd have waited another year, honestly, I put, these are 310 watt panels up. If I'd have put 540 watt panels up, I'd be at 100% now. My answer to that is I'm going to do heavier insulation. I'm going to R60 in the attic in order to get our energy, I'm going to take our energy use down, not my energy generation up. And I could do some of both in order to get there. And then I'm looking to do things like move that vent pipe right there up to about here so I can put another panel or two right there. I'm looking to get a little bit more production on the roof and put a couple of 540s up there instead of the 310s in order to get me there as quickly as I can. I paid for this up front. I could have just done a loan, a home equity loan for this thing. There's no way I was going to let one of the guys who knocks on my door put this up for me. I basically went to Tesla, in this case, this is before we were doing residential ourselves a couple of years ago, told them I wanted to buy it outright. I did. I took the 26% federal tax credit. I'm taking all the SRECs myself. I could have done that home equity loan, and I'd have saved money every month, basically just redirecting my electricity bill payment to my loan is the way it works, and I'd have still saved money every month. Solar. Mm-hmm.
And so what did you do? Anybody who wants to build a new residential unit, ask
was all ready to go. It was solar ready. Yep.
So that's what the country needs in construction, but that requires a building code change.
Exactly. Exactly. But more importantly, requires legislation to sit underneath it that requires it.
And some direction, putting houses so you can direct it so you have a backside facing the south.
Exactly. Exactly.
Big deal too, and those are local codes.
Yes, they are. We bought this. We bought our place 3 years ago. One of the main criteria I had that wasn't what Nadine was looking for, but I immediately looked at the roof, grabbed my compass. I'm a solar developer, so I've got the compass on my phone. Oh my gosh, this is dead south. Here we go. One of the questions that I got before we got together was someone had talked to, and maybe that someone's here. Had talked to the management of her retirement community a couple of years ago about going solar for the retirement community, and the answer came back, we are not a for-profit business, so it doesn't make sense for us to put up solar. And so that structure that I talked to you about a couple of minutes ago for schools, hospitals, churches, non-for-profits, and very much includes retirement communities. This is the array, the 3 megawatt array that we did for Masonic Village in Elizabethtown. We actually did a 1 megawatt array in about 2012. We put up a megawatt's worth of solar generation for Masonic. It worked financially well enough that they called us back a couple of years later and had us come back in 2018 and put up 2 more megawatts of solar. They didn't spend any money up front. The investors put the system up. They paid contract service payments every month for 5 years. They will help them buy the system out when those systems are ready to get bought down, and their savings are going to go up from there, and they are now hedged against future energy inflation as a retirement community. That's big. Good. They wouldn't have been able to hear you. If you're watching online, Will just mentioned that we've got about 15 people watching online, and if you want to send your questions in, Will is staring at his phone. He will shout them out as soon as he gets them. So anyway, for a retirement community or for any not-for-profit, the only entities that really can't use solar well are those that don't use electricity, is what I like to say. Other than that, you're pretty much a candidate. These are some of the projects that we've done relatively recently over the last couple of years. Lots of schools in here, Trogs Breweries in here, Martin Guitars in here. We're just starting that project. Chris Martin's like the eighth or ninth generation Martin that's run Martin Guitar. He's a real environmentalist, so I'm looking forward to getting started there. We've got some auto dealerships that are already signed up, lots of other ones who are moving in this direction in a hurry. Masonic Village is there, another retirement community in Quarryville's there, lots of municipal authorities, solid waste authorities and borough authorities, and the borough of Sayreville. I showed you that floating array up there. I starred the for-profit entities that we've done, and you can see when you just scan down the list that about 80% of that list is not-for-profit entities. It's not because we target not-for-profits, it's just the way it works out. We are CPA driven, so what we do is valuable for for-profit businesses. It's that much more valuable for not-for-profit businesses because of the structure that allows us to be able to use the tax credit and the bonus depreciation. There's the problem. Yeah, that is absolutely right, and I should have shown a slide of that, and we've done those parking canopies, I call them, in New Jersey and in DC. I can't do them financially attractively in Pennsylvania yet because I don't have the SREC value, that renewable energy credit value that supports it. Plus our conventional electricity cost up until PPL and other utilities raised their rates dramatically over the last 12 to 18 months. So basically you have to take those two pieces. You have to take the cost of conventional electricity and add whatever other state incentive, those SRECs, those solar renewable energy certificate values together, and that's my budget, that's my margin for being able to put up solar. If I'm in Pennsylvania 2 years ago and I'm at 5-6 cents per kilowatt hours worth of conventional electricity, which I was 2 years ago, and my SREC values were 3 cents, 4 cents, so I'm adding, let's say 5 cents to 3 cents is 8 cents a kilowatt hours worth of total budget that I've got to do solar. In New Jersey 2 years ago, at the same time, their conventional electricity was 12, 13 cents, like let's say 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and their SREC value was worth 20. So I'm at 32 cents in New Jersey. I'm where I am in St. Vincent. If you remember that, they were spending 35 cents a kilowatt hour for their electricity on St. Vincent. That's where I am in New Jersey, while in Pennsylvania, I'm still fooling around at 8 cents total, right? We're better than that. That's why we are so lagging in solar installation in Pennsylvania. We're down there with Vermont and Connecticut that are only that big. And we're Pennsylvania, for goodness sakes. That's the problem. That's basically what I wanted to talk to you about. Contact information's there. I've got cards here if you want to talk to me about your residence or about a business or about the church or about anything else. But feel free to hear. But I mainly came down for the education. Will, any other questions that have come in? Any other questions from the group? This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate the questions and all the enthusiasm. Thanks.